Hey everyone! So, in my last video, I took you through the graveyard of game projects that I started, but never finished. It was kind of like a guided tour of failed hopes and dreams. Fun times. But today, well, we're talking about something just a little more uplifting. Games that I have actually finished. Some of the games were tiny game jam entries, while others were more ambitious projects that actually brought me in some money. And along the way, I learned a lot, like what to do, what not to do, and especially what not to do if you value your sanity. And trust me, the last game I'm going to talk about definitely taught me the most, so stick around for that one. Okay, so let's start with the game called LifeForge. It was a top-down 2D action-adventure online RPG. And yeah, I know, that sounds like somebody just kind of took a whole bunch of genres and threw them in a blender. But honestly, it kind of worked. LifeForge had like everything. It had bosses, dungeons, quests, looting, crafting, a skill tree, mounts, player housing, and even an auction house. It was kind of like a buffet of RPG features. On LifeForge, I worked with a team, and my role was the lead pixel artist and map designer. And for almost 2 years, I worked on this game, and let me tell you, working with this team taught me a lot about deadlines and collaboration. People were counting on me to deliver, and I was counting on other people to get their part done as well. It was kind of like a weird balancing act, but instead of juggling, I was putting little tiny squares and making pictures and maps. So why'd I stop working on LifeForge? Well, after like 2 years, my interest just kind of generally changed, and I was ready to move on to a whole different project in game. And I don't really know if LifeForge is even online anymore. You can look it up on Steam if you want, but I doubt it's very active. But there's enough in there for you to go ahead and play it solo and have a decent time. So go check it out. This next game is another game I worked with a team on. It was called Operation Reconnect. And it was a game jam entry based on the theme of connection. And on this project, I actually teamed up with a couple of friends of mine. My buddy Noob K handled all the pixel art, my buddy Baz supplied the music, and I was the lead developer, so I did like the programming and level design. Now, as mentioned, the theme was connection, and we took this theme literally, because the goal of this game was to navigate these small maze-like rooms where you would find colored wires and have to match them up to the corresponding door without getting seen and caught by these giant cockroaches that wanted to make you their next meal. And spoiler alert, you were doing all this to restore the internet in order to save humanity. Now, because this was a game jam entry, we had a tight deadline, which meant we had to focus. The core mechanic of the game was stealth, which meant everything else had to be built around this. There were no fancy side quests, no complicated dialogue, just, run, hide, survive. And the result was a finished game with 3 levels, each increasing in difficulty, a catchy soundtrack, and a surprise ending. And I'm proud to say that as far as I know, there are no bugs in this game, other than the ones trying to catch you and eat you. Now, if you think this game looks fun, you can go and check it out. I'll leave a link down to my itch page in the description. Okay, so let's talk about a more recent game that I've worked on. A game that I call Soulless Halloween. Now, this was a game kind of born out of a happy accident, you could say. You see, I was planning on joining this game jam, but I kind of misread the fine print and mixed up the dates, and by the time I even started on the project, the game jam was already over. But instead of giving up, I just challenged myself to get it done by Halloween night, and I started on October 26th, so that gave me a whole 5 days to work on it. No pressure. Now, I had big ideas for this game, but due to the fact that I had to get it done in 5 days, I had to cut a whole bunch of it out. The original idea of the game was you would find these newspaper clippings and piece them together to unravel this mystery about these missing children and even yourself, but I had to cut all of that out just to get the game done. So instead, you would find a newspaper clipping about a missing kid, find the corresponding missing kid, and free their soul. And after you did that 4 times, you get a key to a house that's locked, and once you go in, you fight the final boss of the game. Now, mechanically, the game was simple. You have a gun and a flashlight. The flashlight can expand the player's field of vision, but also uses battery power. Now, the enemies were these jack-o'-lantern spider things that would pop up and chase you once you got so close to them. And honestly, they're kind of easy to avoid, but the fact that you have a limited field of vision means that you could accidentally run into one and have to fight it. And the map of the game is small, but due to the limited vision, it makes it feel big, and getting lost in the game is kind of a guarantee. Now, is this the best game I've ever made? No. But is it finished and playable? Yeah. And the most important thing that this game taught me was how to cut down unneeded features just to get the game done. And for a 5-day project, I think the game turned out pretty okay, considering I developed it all on my own. And if you want to check it out, the link will also be down in the description to my itch.io page. Okay, so finally, the big one, Pentacore. So this was my first major solo project, my first published project, and the first project I've ever released on Steam. You never forget your first. Now, Pentacore was like my love letter to Metroidvania games, especially Super Metroid, which everyone knows is the best game ever made, don't even try and argue. The story is you're a security guard on a distant planet. You wake up out of hypersleep to find that everyone is, well, dead. And you need to find 5 keys to start a spaceship called the Pentacore so you can escape. And this project took me almost 3 years, and if you're asking why, well, it's because life. Between a full-time job and a growing family, I could only work on this game in my free time, which was totally fine with me, because, it was a passion project. Publishing it on Steam was an adventure all in itself. There are things involved with publishing on Steam that you would have never even thought about until you're knee-deep in it, like builds and tax identification numbers and all kinds of other behind-the-scenes chaos. If you've ever published on Steam, then you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, well, consider this your warning. And it was also my first time ever working with a publisher, and while I can't really say a whole lot on that matter due to NDA, I will say that I had a fine experience and I would do it again. One thing I can say about the publisher though is they made it totally possible for me to release Pentacore on the Switch as well. Now, I had very little to do with releasing it on the Switch, so I can't really tell you how any of that works either. But again, thanks to them, I can at least say I've got a game that came out on the Switch. Now, looking back, there are some things I would have done differently with Pentacore. It has its problems, I'm not gonna lie. But it is a game that you can play and finish, and that's pretty cool to me. There are no game-breaking bugs, so that's definitely a plus. And some of the bugs that were found, I wanted to leave in for people in case they decided they wanted to speedrun it or something. And despite its flaws, Pentacore was my first solo developed game that I actually finished. And it's my first game I ever got on Steam. It's the first game I ever got a publisher for, and it's the first game that I've ever got on the Nintendo Switch. And I think that is pretty awesome in my book. And I would even say that if you like Metroidvanias, it's worth checking out. It's on Steam and Nintendo Switch, and it goes on sale often. And well, that's about it. These are some of the games that I've finished and some of the things that I learned from each one of them. So how about you? Have you finished any game projects? Have you played any of mine? Let me know down in the comments what you think if you have, or what games you've made, and maybe I'll check them out. I'd love to hear and see all of your guys' games. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. This has been John with John Does Game Dev, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.